Don't forget, you can support the Shaun Starr Show by supporting our sponsors like Silver Paw Dog, silverpawdog.com. It's their everything pet warehouse sale event, up to 80% off jackets, collars, raincoats, sweaters, treats and toys, beds and supplements. 3237 Boulevard des Sources. So that's Gallery des Sources. It's their everything pet warehouse sale event, May 2nd to May 4th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Click the link in the pinned comment of this video for your chance to win $200 to spend at Silver Paw Dog. The Montreal Canadiens captain is having himself a season. Nick Suzuki has done something a forward hasn't done in seemingly forever. We're talking about better than a point-a-game player. He's also exceptionally well-disciplined, and he's shown that constantly throughout the course of this season. Marco D'Amico, let's talk about the Canadiens captain, Nick Suzuki, for a second. And while we're all convinced Lane Hutson is the NHL's Rookie of the Year, is it out of the realm of possibility Nick Suzuki could be up for a Selke nom this season?
I wouldn't put it past. I think, especially of late, he's someone that didn't necessarily start on the PK, but now is an essential part of it. Has two shorthanded goals. Just plays an overall incredible amount of two-way hockey for the Canadiens. This is a guy that was getting, from an advanced analytics perspective, just getting destroyed up until this season at 5-on-5, and really, was seen as kind of a guy that was getting most of his points on the power play. Well, this season we're seeing a little bit more diversity into how he's scoring, but also a little bit more diversity into how he is helping the team defensively in terms of being able to control the pace and how strong he is when he's on the ice. And I think for a guy that plays as much as he does, he's basically an average of 20 minutes per game. That kind of two-way ability is just so important. I think the only thing that really hurts him is that he only really started to eat a lot of those, penalty kill minutes in the second half of the season. Had he played the full season, I feel like we would be hearing a whole lot more noise in terms of the Selke. But all this is doing is cementing himself as a future candidate for that trophy this season and moving forward.
That's a great point. When you talk about Nick Suzuki's second half, certainly more specifically post Four Nations break, and when you look at the Selke Trophy winners over the past, 4 seasons, Barkov from Florida, Patrice Bergeron back-to-back years, back to Barkov. What similarities does Nick Suzuki share with those two outstanding players? And Patrice Bergeron, first ballot Hall of Famer, obviously, a Stanley Cup champ and a leader internationally and league-wide with Boston in his day. What do you see shared amongst Suzuki and those two other guys in Barkov and Bergeron?
Well, I think all of them were really strong defensive first players, also incredibly underrated until they weren't, right? Sasha Barkov did not get the flowers that he deserved until Florida finally won the Cup last year. And I feel like that's always what's going to end up happening to someone like Nick Suzuki. He's not going to get his flowers until he really just makes people turn their heads. I think the same thing applied to Patrice Bergeron, where he was always an elite defensive player. But when he really started playing with Pasternak and Marchand, that's when it became unanimous, and the Selke was just basically his for the taking every year. I feel that's kind of the same way in this situation. What I think is helping Suzuki a lot is his face-off percentages have improved. I think he's closer to 52% now. So a good amount over 50%, considering he's taking something north of 1,100 face-offs this season or 1,200 face-offs. That's a lot. That's a big difference. That means you're winning 8 to 12 more on average in general over the long term per month. And those can be big face-offs in games. So when you're looking at the impact over time, I think that he just goes to show unanimously a first-line center, but it's so rare for first-line centers to be that strong two-way and be successful in winning a Selke, because not only do they face the best defensive players of the opposition, but they also face the best offensive players of the opposition. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration for something like this, because Nick Suzuki, by virtue of his usage, faces everybody because he's almost always on the ice when it counts.
Patrice Bergeron, right, is a great story. In his entry year, in his draft year, I should say, 2003, he was a 45th overall choice. Also, obviously, second-round pick, right? And when you look at his unbelievable career with close to 1,300 games played at the NHL level, he had never reached the point total that Nick Suzuki has reached this season. It's never happened. 79 points is as good as it ever got for Patrice Bergeron in 65 games, 32 goals, and 47 assists. I remember years ago the comp of, Nick Suzuki, maybe the next Patrice Bergeron. People would laugh at that type of point of view. Seems a little bit more closer to reality today. Is that fair, or is it still a little bit of a stretch as far as you're concerned here?
I think there's always a standard deviation when it comes to comps for players. Like, is he as good a face-off man as Bergeron was? Maybe not. Is he a better offensive talent? Yes, he is. And so, like, that's the give and take. But, Patrice Bergeron played, like, on average a minute and a half every game on the penalty kill, if not more. Suzuki right now is averaging about a minute. And so, like, he's not necessarily that, like, to the elite level of defense where, like, you could just basically take it to the bank with a guy like Bergeron. But I think he's right there, right under him in the next bracket. And I feel like Alexander Barkov hasn't had the season that you would expect of a Selke nominee, just because he's kind of taken a dip defensively overall, and so is the team, which is understandable considering the Stanley Cup hangover and all his injuries. But when you look at a guy like Nick Suzuki, I just feel like the overall play is just so there. Other guys that come to my mind are like Robert Thomas, who's been playing lights out for the St. Louis Blues under a certain coach that had a lot to do with, Patrice Bergeron's success Mr. Montgomery, who was taken from the Boston Bruins. I'm not saying that he developed a player like Patrice Bergeron, but I think he offered him a lot of rope, and he sees a lot of those similarities in a guy like Rob Thomas, and he's going to let him play. And that's what we're seeing right now. So it may be a year where we see some not unnatural, but I would say like some non-usual Selke nominations. I think a guy that may surprise a lot of people that I think could be the front runner this year is Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner, even for a winger, Mitch Marner, 2 minutes on average on the penalty kill while putting up 100 points this season. Just absolutely, dominant at both ends of the ice. So that's a guy to watch out for as well. But I think from a center perspective, Nick Suzuki is definitely at that top of that list.
Are we talking about a Canadiens captain that's hit his ceiling? How much more room is there then if you don't believe he's hit his ceiling?
I don't. Because I
know we've spoken in the past about the potential of 100 points, and it's not far fetched. It really isn't. So if we both kind of agree that based on circumstance he can get there, how much more room is there left to grow in this man's game, as far as you're concerned?
From a points perspective, I think once he's better surrounded, I think you're going to be in business. I think once you have a dynamic and legitimate second line center that could play behind him in a competitive standpoint, it's going to alleviate so much. And it's going to open up the game for the Canadiens. This is going to be a more offensive team, less reliant on one guy. Don't have to double shift him and get him tired. The less tired Nick Suzuki is, the more dangerous he gets on the ice. And I feel like in that time, he'll also have the ability to improve on other defensive aspects of his game, such as his faceoffs, such as gap control, positioning, which is already improved by leaps and bounds and continues to do so. And I think that's the key that we've heard from people around him, is that he's constantly getting better, even though offensively a lot of players peak around the age that he's at. But he's doing it in a way where he's the sole driver of that team in terms of offense. Well, what's going to happen if he's not the best offensive piece? Everyone's going to elevate accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I mean, are we, I like the comment you had made earlier when we were going over some of the Selke winners, right, in the past 4 seasons, alternating Barkov, Bergeron back-to-back, and then Barkov last year. And it's always funny, when the Athletic does its NHL player poll, Barkov has the distinction of being the most underrated player in hockey and has had that for a few seasons, right? Like, exactly. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You win the Stanley Cup. So is Nick Suzuki the odds-on favorite to take over and run with that torch as the most underrated player for the next couple of seasons? Is that his honor? Is he going to be tagged with that?
I think that he is. I think, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but for what he does, I think he is the most underrated player in the forward in the NHL. I think the most underrated player possibly could be Jacob Slavin playing for the Carolina Hurricanes, the best defensive defenseman in the NHL.
Good pull.
And someone that should be yearly nominated for the Norris if it actually had to be a defenseman, an overall defenseman's award, and not simply like an Art Ross for defensemen.
Do we want to call it Suzuki for Selke 2025? We calling it?
I'm not calling it.
Okay,
But I would
I'm not calling
definitely.
it.
I'm not calling it, but I think he'll definitely be in the top 5 nominations. He's going to get some top 3 calls in there as well,
Correct.
in my honest opinion.
Correct.
But I think this is more of what's to come for a guy like Nick Suzuki. And I think that if he's actually got offensive firepower around him, his defensive game will show a little bit more because he'll be less tasked with being the guy pulling the bus as opposed to being the guy that keeps the bus moving.
Marco, excited for what's to come and the push towards the playoffs. Unbelievable as always. Congratulations on the Ivan Demidov story, and let's keep pushing forward. It's going to be an exciting spring into the summer. Thanks as always, Marco.
Always a pleasure, guys. Have a good one.